Hello. Today I'm going to be bringing you a new upcoming premium ship. In this case, it's going to be a preview and not a review, as the stats on the ship are not final and some of them are in fact going to change. The ship is the Mutsu, the Tier 6 Japanese battleship. Now, this ship, well, first of all, Tier 6 is always going to be a troublesome tier right now, because both Tier 5 and Tier 6 ships suffer from being placed against much higher matchmaking, which obviously means that these ships have to be quite strong, especially in things like gunpowder, to be able to compete against higher tiers. It's pretty notorious that ships that lack gunpowder, for example, let's take the Nuremberg, struggle extremely hard against higher tier ships because, well, they simply can't deal any damage to them. However, in this case, the Mutsu does perfectly well. In fact, this ship has the biggest guns of Tier 6 so far. 410mm guns. These are even bigger than the Warspite's 381mm guns, so it has massive guns. Now right now, however, the reload is 35 seconds on this, but as I said, this is a bit of a preview version. They have already set some balancing changes up, and one of the changes is reducing the reload from 35 seconds to 30. So the damage potential is obviously going to go up thanks to that. The health pool on it is 58.4k, which is pretty competitive with all the other ships. However, it's pretty misleading, to be fair, because the ship is actually quite thinly armored, especially the turrets like to be knocked out a fair amount, and in general you are surprisingly squishy in this ship. In fact, I rarely wanted to get into close brawls or like straight up fights against even other tier 6 ships, because even though you pack a mean punch with these strong guns, the ship is very papery and quite easy to punish. Which I considered a good thing, because if it had these guns and it was just as tanky as, let's say, something like an Arizona, well, then we might have some serious balancing issues. But ultimately, I quite like this thing. And I do sneaky plays with it, as you can see here. You see the massive damage to something like a Dunkirk. The Dunkirk, of course, notoriously thin armored, so something like a Mutsu absolutely punishes this ship very heavily, even though he angled towards me. In fact, you saw no bounces, you saw 3 pens and 2 overpens. And that's kind of the story, the glass cannon of a ship. Now, turret traverse, it's okay, it's fairly slow. It's one of the things that is also going to be buffed. Right now it has a rotation rate of 3.3 degrees per second. It's going to be buffed to 3.8 degrees per second, so a fairly significant buff. Also worth noting, I'm using my Yamato captain, not a specific captain for this ship, otherwise I wouldn't actually be using direction center. So if you're wondering why I'm actually firing off 2 spotting planes, it's because I'm not using the optimal captain for this ship. I would never actually recommend using direction center for spotting planes. Anyway, regarding the secondaries, as you can see, it actually has a ton of them all over the ship. If you look at the broadside of the ship, you can see just how many it has. Sadly, the range on them is quite low. It's something around like 5 km with AFT, and the majority of them shoot AP. Now, some of you might probably know HE secondaries are significantly more useful since they start fires, and AP secondaries, especially low caliber ones, are just going to be bouncing and not really doing much. So pretty pointless, but hey, it has a lot of them. And of course, another thing worth mentioning, as you can already probably see down there when you looked at the secondaries, is the fact that yes, it has torpedoes. It has these really oddly placed torps that are hidden right in the middle of the ship. It's only got 2 single launchers per side. These torps do 10.8k damage each, so if you land 2 on the side, you can potentially do like 21k, 22k damage. Of course, with torpedo reductions included, it's probably not actually going to be that much, but it's a nifty little addition. They have 7 km of range, they do 57 knots, so they are fairly useful. 7 km is a fairly long distance, to be fair, for these torps. And what's weird about them is that they reload extremely quickly. They have a 21-second reload. Now, of course, since I run Adrenaline Rush, you can imagine that this can easily be cut down by a good 10-15%. So we're talking sub 20-second reload time on these torps when it actually matters. So really strange torps, but ultimately they are really more of an emergency use kind of thing. You can't really play around them like, let's say, if you were a Scharnhorst now torpedoes, where you can actually charge in and use them offensively, because first of all, the firing angles are very, very narrow, meaning you have to give pretty much full broadside to use them. And second of all, the ship really isn't suited for brawling because, as I said earlier, it is quite thinly armored, so any sort of brawling will probably be hurting you more than you're hurting the enemy. And you want to be using these guns for you want to be using these guns more at range, really. Talking about squishiness, of course, torpedo belt, it actually only has a 24% reduction. I think it's actually 21, but I'm running, of course, the damage control modification 1, so that gives you, what, 3%, I think? So yeah, I think it's got a 21 by stock, which compared to, I think, Fuso has a 34 per stock, whereas Arizona with the module has something like 39%. So you're going to be taking a lot more torpedo damage than everyone else. Even the Dunkirk, notorious. Here you can see the torpedo angles, you can see how narrow they are, but you do have a 7 km range, and you can see just how quickly these torpedoes are reloading down there on the bar. So they're more of a gimmick. Like, I don't think I've landed a single torp. I might have landed one or two or at some battleship at some point, but they're more of a gimmicky thing. They're fun little extra, more firepower. You don't never. It's like, why complain? Especially with between the reload times of guns, you might shoot them off. But I really hope we're not going to see a lot of team kills with these things, because I remember the last time the Torpedoes was introduced and a lot of people bought it, and there were so many people launching these torps from 20 km away and just team killing everyone. Anyway, about the torps, as I was saying, the torpedo belt is garbage. I think the weakest at tier 6, even the Dunkirk which has a notoriously terrible torpedo belt, even the Dunkirk has a better torpedo belt. Now, the AA on it is also absolute garbage. I think even the Fuso and the Warspite have better AA than you do. Not by much, but I mean, those two are notoriously bad against planes themselves, so don't expect to defend against any sort of strikes without help. Even against, I'd probably say, probably a T5 carrier can probably wreck you if he knows what he's doing. So, what else? Maneuverability. That should probably be pointed out. This ship... I do love these guns. These guns are so meaty. Also, of course, talking about the guns, I should mention that one of the strengths, even though this armor is quite thin, is the optimal firing angles you can actually achieve. If you look at these angles at which I can use all my guns, they are pretty damn fantastic. You don't have to expose much broadside at all, which is of course a much needed thing, because if you're exposing a lot of broadside in this ship, you get punished very, very heavily. So the ability to angle and knowing how to angle when playing the ship is going to be highly important, because this ship is quite unforgiving about giving a lot of broadside. Speed-wise, 26.5 knots, which is actually pretty fast for a tier 6. It's 2 knots faster than the Fusos, 3 knots faster than the Warspite, so I think it's a lot faster than something like the Arizona. I think Arizona does something like 22 knots or something similar. So it's quite fast, but it pays for it. As with most of these things, when you have an advantage, it comes with a disadvantage. In this case, it's of course the turning circle. You have a pretty large turning circle of 770 meters, which is quite a lot larger than many of these similar battleships. Ooh, Fuso giving broadside. Will it be a spanking? Ah, no citadels. Still a nice chunk of damage. Concealment. Well, much like the Fuso, your concealment is absolutely garbage. That's of course one of the other balancing factors of this ship, besides the squishiness, is of course the fact that the stealth on this thing is complete garbage. With a CE, concealment expert, oof, as I was talking, some of my turrets were actually angled towards them, but they still damaged the turret. And that's kind of what I mean. The turrets are very fragile on the ship. Especially if you make the mistake of pointing the turrets away from your target, so they get to shoot at some of the sides instead of the actual armored fronts, then you're going to be suffering a lot of damage to these turrets. I instantly repaired because I didn't want to lose it. Anyway, the concealment is terrible. With the concealment expert captain, you can reach a 14.1 km detection. That's actually worse than both the Arizona and the Warspite without them running a concealment expert captain. The Warspite, I think, can get something like 11.8 km concealment with the proper captain. So when it comes to stealth, you're completely outmatched. But those citadels, this ship, the guns though are extremely satisfying. The guns are very satisfying on the ship, and that's of course one of the reasons why I kind of consider this ship to be fairly good at matching up against higher tiers, because it does have these huge guns. I mean, in general, tier 6 premiums are something that I have a very hard time recommending, but this Mutsu ship has actually been quite fun to play. Surprisingly fun, even though, as you can see, once again in this game I'm against T7, T8 matchmaking, which as I said for T6 right now is very common. So it's certainly not a bad ship. It's actually quite a fun ship. I've seen Wargaming themselves call it a glass cannon, and I think that's a pretty apt description. That was a pretty nice volley. And it does fit the whole glass cannon thing pretty actively. I mean, it has a lot of weaknesses, but the strengths are absolutely the big guns and managing to play around them. And usually big guns is, as I said at the start, something you really want when facing higher tiers. So I have really been enjoying the big guns on this ship and the advantage it gives. So straight up, recommending this or not? Honestly, it's pretty damn fun. But I mean, you have to keep in mind, you are most likely going to be matched up. So ultimately, when it comes, if you have to decide between buying a tier 6, tier 7 or tier 8, I will always say get a T8, or, well, if you're going to play ranked, get a T7. But if you had to buy a T6 premium, if I had to rank it compared to other tier 6 premiums, this thing would be pretty damn high up there on the top. Because you got to keep in mind that this is of course the preview version that I'm playing. The actual live version will have 5% faster, 5 seconds faster reload on the guns. It will have faster turret traverse, and it will have a slightly faster rudder shift time. It's something like 1 second faster, so that won't really change much. But the gun, they're buffing the guns even more, because obviously Wargaming realizes that the strength and kind of the bread and butter thing of this ship are the guns themselves. So that's what they're addressing in the upcoming live patch for the ship. So honestly, if you like this type of gameplay, if you like this type of glass cannon battleship, then pretty recommended. I mean, it's a premium, so it's gonna make you money regardless of what you do, and as long as they don't put some sort of obscene price on it, this is a pretty fun ship with the torpedoes and things. You can do some nifty things. And if you do end up getting against like T6 to T5 matchmaking, these guns are pretty damn brutal. Of course, I wouldn't call it overpowered, because once again, pretty much any tier 6 battleship can put up a pretty damn good fight against this thing, because this ship literally only needs to show broadside once and it gets hit so damn hard. But for people who really know how to for people who know to angle their battleships and enjoy these big guns, then tier 6 wise, this is a pretty damn good investment, I think, and a lot of people are going to enjoy playing this ship simply because of the meaty guns themselves. Because getting usually 410mm guns is something you can only get, I think, at the Nagata. I think the Nagata has those guns, so you have to, or just is the Nagata 406mm, and then you get 410 on the Amag. I can't remember. But regardless, having these big guns at tier 6 is definitively an experience. And if you end up against tier 5, tier 6s, I didn't want to show it here because, well, it's pretty rare. But when you do happen in those kind of games, well, the guns are absolutely hilarious, since you can pretty much overmatch anything and you punch straight through the nose on many of the ships and so forth. There's nothing quite like a Belfast or something thinking he's the big dog and then you just wreck him with these guns. But of course, here you get to see some of the torps once again. You see the extremely low cooldown on these torps. I just launched them and I'm already launching them again. Like, torp is still in the water and I'm already launching more torps. So the reload on those is very good. But of course, actually getting that close to some, or being able to use them, is quite hard, simply because of the squishiness. Let's see if I can finally nail this Mayoka. He keeps cutting away from me. Dispersion! Well, it's still battleship dispersion. So, well, you can see exactly what that means. I think it has pretty much the same dispersion as the other tier 6 ships. I don't think it has, like, any special bonuses in that. At least I haven't noticed any specifically accurate volleys I've been getting. It feels just like battleships. Sometimes you miss, sometimes you nail them. It comes and goes. Is this Charno's gonna turn? It looks like it's turning. Of course, one thing that having these torpedoes do give you, that I must mention, besides of course simply being able to use them, is you can quickly tap 3 to see the speed of your target. And that's of course definitely worth mentioning. As I've said often on my turpets, I tend to tap 3 to see how quickly my target is moving, is he reversing, and so forth. And now you have access to your own speedometer, in this case of course the torpedo prediction system. So it makes aiming these big guns a lot easier when you can just tap it every now and then to see what they're doing. Okay, now of course I don't have any achievements here. Usually by this point I'm pretty sure I'd have stuff like Confederate, probably high caliber. In fact, I'm working on my Kraken here. I'd probably have a devastating strike, 1 or 2 of them. So, will I nail him? Oh, I don't think I'm gonna have time to reload and get him. Yeah, I don't think there's gonna be any unofficial Kraken. Of course, previous ships like these, they don't give us any achievements. Well, sadly the game ended before I could get my unofficial Kraken, but of course with my health I'd probably get Dreadnought, maybe even Fireproof, so there should be a bunch of medals. So, of course, damage-wise, 154,000, which for T6 is pretty nice. Potential damage, 1.7 million. Damage received, 94,000. Credits and XP, well, it's premium, and I run premium account. Team score-wise, almost 2k base XP. Pretty damn nice, considering it wasn't even a nomination game, so XP is reduced. Moving on, of course, to my recommended build on this ship. Consumable wise, premium heal, premium repair, premium spotting plane is not necessary. I just run it because I have so many credits. Main armaments mod, absolutely. Your turrets are very, very squishy. You absolutely want this. Do not go for the other one. Aiming system, the absolute best one. Your AA is so garbage. There's no point even attempting to buff this thing. So just go for the reduced dispersion. Damage mod 1 and steering gears mod 2. Once again, your torpedo belt is paper. You want to be able to dodge and torpedo beat with this thing. You don't want to try to even attempt to tank torps or anything in this thing. You just want to be avoiding as much damage as possible. As mentioned, this is my Yamato captain, hence I'm running direction center, but I don't recommend it. In fact, I'd recommend running preventive maintenance on the Mutsu once again for the turret survival. Expert marksman, the turret is going to be buffed, but it's still going to be slow, so you still want that expert marksman on your guns. Adrenaline rush, I absolutely love it on all battleships, well, a lot of ships. Superintendent, vigilance, and finally concealment expert. Those are the must-haves. AFT that I'm running, once again, this is my Yamato captain. AFT, very questionable if you actually want to run it, because, well, as I said, the AA and the secondaries are both garbage, and spending points on buffing something that's garbage always feels like a waste to me. So ultimately, there are probably better options you could use those last 4 points on. If you made a Mutsu specific captain, I would probably go maybe even fire prevention, but that's not fire prevention on a small ship like this that you don't really want to tank in is also pretty questionable. In fact, the better option would maybe go for full reduced cooldowns, aka you go for jack of all trades and high alert, reducing repair, heal and such to increase the survivability. That would probably be the best option for a pure Mutsu captain. Anyway, that was my commentary or preview of this Mutsu. As I've said, this is not the final version, but ultimately tier 6 comes with its downsides, which is matchmaking, but if you can overlook that part, then the Mutsu seems like a pretty goddamn fun new premium. Anyway, that was all I had to say. I hope you guys enjoyed my preview.